We all know, like intellectually, that a 100-story skyscraper doesn't just magically spring out of the ground fully formed.
Mm.
You stand on the sidewalk looking up at thousands of tons of glass and steel, and your rational brain understands that this towering monolith is the result of years of tedious blueprint revisions and zoning board meetings and millions of individual steel rivets.
Right, it's not magic.
Exactly. We know there is no magic involved in engineering. Yet, when it comes to our own lives, I mean, our careers, our creative pursuits, our personal growth, we somehow just abandon that foundational logic.
We really do.
You look at an innovator or a master of their craft or someone who has achieved extraordinary success, and then you look at your own life.
Yeah.
And perhaps you realize you've been stuck in the exact same place for years.
Seeing the exact same walls.
Do the same things, yeah. And instead of looking for the blueprints or the rivets, we ask, why them and not you? Was it a lucky break? Did the universe just hand them a winning lottery ticket?
Well, it is incredibly seductive to believe it's just luck. Because if extraordinary success is nothing more than a cosmic dice roll, then our own stagnation isn't our fault.
We get to avoid the blame.
Precisely. We are completely absolved of the responsibility. We can simply tell ourselves the universe didn't pick us this time, and we can comfortably stay right where we are.
But today, we are tearing down that myth entirely. We are pulling from a fascinating framework today, specifically excerpts from a text called The Mental Architecture of Achievement.
It's a really powerful read.
It really is. And our mission for this deep dive is to deconstruct the actual grounded psychology of success from these sources. We are going to isolate the specific mindset shifts and the unseen daily frameworks that definitively separate high achievers from everyone else.
And the text doesn't hold back at all.
No, it does not.
Okay.
Let's unpack this, because the very first thing this text does is take a sledgehammer to that idea of luck. And more importantly, it completely dismantles the multi-billion-dollar cultural obsession we have with feeling motivated.
Yeah, the text lays out a very clear, very uncompromising principle right from the start. Success is dictated entirely by the way you think, act, and grow every single day.
Every day.
Right, every single day. And the framework introduces a psychological hierarchy that really challenges the modern self-help industry. It's the reality that consistency beats motivation every single time. It completely demotes the concept of being inspired.
I am so glad we are starting here, because we are constantly sold this idea that if we just find the right quote or, the right hyped up video or wait for the perfect sudden burst of inspiration, our lives will permanently change.
Like we just need that one magic spark.
Yes. We treat motivation like it's the entire vehicle. But to me, relying on motivation feels like trying to drive a car using only a spark plug.
Oh, wow. That is a brilliant way to conceptualize it. Because neurochemically speaking, a spark plug is exactly how a dopamine spike functions in the human brain.
Right, because a spark plug gives you a brilliant, hot, instantaneous burst of energy, but it's transient.
Highly transient.
Yeah. You cannot physically power a vehicle across the 3,000-mile cross-country journey on spark alone.
Mm-hmm.
The actual journey requires the engine, the repetitive, unglamorous, tightly predictable mechanical cycling of pistons.
What's fascinating here is the underlying evolutionary biology of why that spark, that motivation, is fundamentally unreliable for long-term achievement.
Unreliable how?
Well, motivation is heavily tied to dopamine, which is the neurotransmitter associated with reward and anticipation. So when you imagine a massive goal, say writing a novel, launching a startup, or completely overhauling your physical health, you get a massive dopamine spike.
Because your brain loves the fantasy of the finished skyscraper.
Exactly. It rewards you just for imagining it. But our brains evolved for immediate survival, right? Not 5-year business plans.
Right.
So the moment you actually sit down to mix the concrete, the moment you face the tedious, difficult reality of the actual work, that dopamine just plummets.
Because the brain realizes the reward isn't coming today. It's basically saying, wait, typing this paragraph isn't giving us immediate calories or status. Shut off the feel-good chemical.
Precisely. And that introduces a paradox that the source material touches on, which is that highly motivated people often burn out faster than anyone else.
Oh, wait, really? The highly motivated ones?
Yeah, because they are riding a dopamine treadmill. They get addicted to the emotional high of starting a new project. But because dopamine receptors become desensitized by those constant emotional peaks, the moment the novelty wears off and the spark dies, they abandon the project to go look for a new spark.
Ah, so they never actually finish anything.
Right. The framework argues that high achievers don't wait for motivation to strike. They recognize that if they only act when they feel inspired, their progress will be biologically unsustainable.
So they externalize the pressure. They shift from an emotional approach to a mechanical approach. They just start the engine, even if they have absolutely zero desire to drive that day.
They just do the work.
Right. But this raises an obvious issue. If the secret formula for success is simply, build the engine, be consistent, and do the work every day, that sounds incredibly straightforward.
It sounds almost too easy on paper.
Yeah, yet the vast majority of people do not do that. They remain entirely stuck. So if our failure to achieve isn't a mechanical problem, it must be a psychological one. So what does this all mean? When the source material talks about fear stopping most people in their tracks, is it a fear of the actual hard work, or is it the fear of the failure that comes with trying?
This raises an important question about what exactly the human ego is so terrified of. I mean, are we genuinely afraid of putting in a 10-hour day?
I wouldn't think so.
No, the data says no. Humans are incredibly resilient and capable of immense, grueling labor under the right circumstances.
So what paralyzes us then?
What paralyzes us is not the expenditure of energy, but the potential destruction of our identity. The fear stopping most people is the psychological dread of trying their absolute best, dedicating years of their life to a pursuit, and still falling short.
Oh, wow. It's the fear of confirmation that maybe we aren't as brilliant or capable as we hoped we were.
Exactly. That is the core fear.
I have totally fallen victim to this. It's like when I decide I'm going to run a marathon, right? I will buy the $300 running shoes on a Sunday, map out an intricate, color-coded training schedule, and I feel amazing.
The dopamine is flowing.
Oh, the dopamine is flowing heavily.
Okay.
And then by Wednesday morning, it's raining, my shins hurt, and I realize I am incredibly slow. And I quit.
But you don't tell yourself you couldn't do it.
No, of course not. I preserve my ego by saying, oh, I'm just too busy with work right now to commit to training. The comfort zone gives me an out.
And the comfort zone is incredibly seductive because it functions as a sort of suspended animation chamber for your potential.
A suspended animation chamber. I like that.
In that chamber, your ego is perfectly safe. If you never write the book, the manuscript can never be rejected by publishers.
If you never launch the business, you never have to face bankruptcy.
Right. It feels like safety, but as the framework points out, staying stuck is actually the ultimate failure. You are guaranteeing the exact outcome you are afraid of. You aren't succeeding.
You're just choosing the quiet, slow failure of never trying over the loud public failure of taking a shot.
That is a perfect way to put it. And the source material explicitly pairs this concept of fear stopping most people with the absolute necessity of learning from failure.
Because high achievers aren't fearless.
No, not at all. The psychology of success tells us that high achievers are not fearless. They do not possess some superhuman immunity to the sting of rejection. They hate it just as much as you do.
So what's the difference then?
Their mental architecture allows them to process it through a completely different filter.
They reframe it. They shift failure from being a permanent identity into a temporary data point.
Yes, exactly. For the average person, failure is a verdict. It is a judge banging a gavel and declaring you are not good enough, you will never be good enough.
Ouch. Yeah, that's heavy.
But for the high achiever, failure is purely diagnostic. It says, this specific variable in this specific approach did not yield the desired result.
So if you are operating mechanically, like we discussed with consistency, then a failure is just a moment where the engine misfired.
Exactly. You don't take the car to the junkyard. You pop the hood, look at the telemetry data, adjust the timing belt, and start it again. You calibrate.
That shift from a verdict to a diagnostic, that is a massive perspective change.
It changes everything.
Because if failure is just feedback, then it's no longer this terrifying monster hiding under the bed. It's just a heavily disguised teacher.
A very stern teacher, but a teacher nonetheless.
Right, right. But I have to push back here for a second because this all sounds incredibly neat and tidy in theory.
Sure.
Let's talk about the reality. Enduring failure hurts.
Oh, absolutely.
And when someone is chronically exhausted, I mean, maybe they're working 2 jobs, dealing with family crises, completely burned out from the day-to-day grind, telling them to just operate mechanically and view failure as a diagnostic feels bordering on impossible.
It's huge ass.
It feels biologically overwhelming to try and overcome that natural human desire to retreat to the comfort zone.
Yeah.
How does this architecture actually account for real-world burnout and exhaustion?
That pushback is entirely valid, and it's honestly the exact friction point where most self-help advice completely falls apart.
Right, because it's easy to say be consistent when you have endless free time and energy.
Exactly. When you are chronically exhausted, relying on sheer willpower to endure failure and keep going will absolutely break you. Willpower is a finite cognitive resource.
You just run out of it.
You do, and the framework accounts for this through its ultimate solution. You have to bypass the exhausted emotional ego entirely.
Okay, how do you do that?
You do that by utilizing the architecture of habit.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because we throw the word habit around all the time, right? Usually in the context of, like, drinking more water or making our beds.
Small things, yeah.
But the source material is talking about daily habits that change your life, connecting them directly to the concept of delayed gratification. And I always like to think of delayed gratification as a savings account for your true potential.
I love that. And I think we need to stretch that savings account analogy further to really understand how it bypasses exhaustion.
Oh, stretch away.
Well, the math of that account relies on a very specific part of the brain called the basal ganglia.
Break that down for me. What is the basal ganglia doing in this context?
Think of the basal ganglia as the brain's autopilot system. When you first learn to drive a car, your prefrontal cortex, which is the conscious decision-making part of your brain, is completely engaged.
Yeah, you are hyper aware of everything, the pedals, the mirrors, the steering wheel.
And it is cognitively exhausting.
No.
But after a year of driving, you can commute all the way home from work and not remember a single moment of the drive.
Oh yeah, highway hypnosis. It's terrifying but true.
Right. And that happens because the prefrontal cortex offloaded the mechanical steps to the basal ganglia to save energy. High achievers basically train their basal ganglia to automate their work habits.
So they aren't relying on willpower at all.
Rarely. I mean, when you force yourself to do something difficult through sheer willpower, like studying